what kind of apps have you mainly been focusing on right now? Because obviously a lot of things aren't going to work on macOS because they are specifically built for
Mhm.
something on Linux. So what has been your main concern?
So I want to bring in nested compositor support.
Hmm.
And to do that, I need to not only make Wawana compositor a compositor, but also allow it to run nested compositing. And so I thought, well, the only compositor that I really care about is Sway Effects. And before I even bother, I will just dig into a reference compositor called Weston. And
Hmm.
Weston actually gives you a bunch of built-in like libweston clients. You can just test them.
Hmm.
And you can test for certain backends like OpenGL and stuff. And right now, my main focus is to see if how many of those I can support. Right now, I can get like Weston Terminal up and running, and I can pipe it over directly from my Linux machine,
Hmm.
so I don't have to compile it natively. And I did run in some other tests. I was able to get Weston Simple SHM running, and that is basically a CPU-based pixel rendering for Weston Compositor. And all of these I can render either nested inside of Weston or just on their own. And that's something that I find really unique and special about having Wayland on something like an iPhone is you can just run the app as if it was a regular app, and it'll fit the screen and everything.
That's cool.
Yeah.
That's cool. So right now, what is kind of the state of things? Like, what works well ish? What doesn't work? How much work do you have to do?
So I started over.
Okay.
So right now it's pretty limited. I haven't even tested iOS or Android yet again,
Mhm.
and I am thinking of adding Linux support directly. So we'll just see. Um, I don't want to overdo it because there's going to be a lot on my plate, and the scope is massive. But there's a lot of work that's already been done,
Mhm.
and all I really have to do is put it all together.
Mhm.
And even though there's a lot to do, we we don't have Vulkan really. We don't have OpenGL. macOS has drivers for OpenGL, and they're deprecated since macOS Mojave. Um, yeah, and Xcort still uses them. So what I really would like to see is like maybe getting some graphics drivers running, and I know there's a few that I'd like to try, such as Cosmic Crisp, and that was one of the things I first tried when I started on macOS was getting Cosmic Crisp driver,
Mhm.
and that's essentially like Vulkan 1.3 compliant for macOS by
Oh.
Lunarg.
Yep, yep, yep.
And I tried getting that running on iOS as well, and I have no idea if it worked because I don't know how to test Vulkan. And so the state right now is there's a lot of stuff that really doesn't work,
Mhm.
and I'm kind of focused on getting just like the basics because right now I just fixed keyboard input. You couldn't like type. Um,
Oh, that's a problem.
Previously, you could in my C implementation, but I just started over, and everything's in Rust now, the backend. So it's going to take a lot of time, and I have to figure out how to structure this so that it works going forward in a maintainable way.
Mhm. Mhm. Yeah, that's kind of a big thing. Like, it's one thing if you're just building some like tiny little project no one cares about, but if you actually want
Yeah.
this to be some big maintainable project,
Hmm.
actually having a sensible structure, like no matter what you do, you're gonna have to restructure things, but you want to try to limit that as
Hmm.
much as possible.
And I did find I am able to use Rust. There's actually a lot less work to do with Rust because a lot of people who are on the Rust Wayland projects, they've already got it compiled for macOS, and I don't have to do any porting there, which is nice. Uh, but there's still like compositing. That's
Mhm.
still like the biggest issue that I am going to constantly run into. Compositing, zero copy. Um, how do I get accelerated graphics going? And macOS is kind of just incompatible with most of it. So I got to figure out the best way to translate it over. And in in addition, like you can like compile Wayland apps directly and run them directly on a Mac or iOS.
Mhm.
And with this Wayland compositor, that's totally possible. You don't need any uh, any native UI to do it. Like you don't need to import Cocoa and all that. But I I I want to just like look at it as Wamona compositor is not necessarily just a Wayland compositor.
Mm,
It's not that it's implementation detail. Like, I don't want to focus on that because what I really want people to think about is what's possible. If I have Wayland on my phone, if I have Wayland on my Mac,
mm,
what can I do with
mm,
that? And the answer is, well, if you can just SSH into a Linux machine, you can run anything on Linux, right?
mhm, mhm,
You can port Linux apps directly. If you have the source code, you can just use my Wayland compositor and bam, you can run it directly on those computers. Stuff that's not really been done. But I I just want to like point out we have Android, we have like Waydroid on
mhm.
Linux. Imagine running Android applications on your iPhone. Like there's like just I just want people to think about what the possibilities are. If you really have Wayland running
Mhm.
as if it was native and it works natively like a regular application, what is possible? And
Mhm.
that's when I start going a little crazy. I'm like, holy crap, like I can run Sway directly. I can, I can run GNOME if I wanted to. Like I could get up a whole desktop environment that's usually for Linux, compile it natively for my Mac, and
Mhm.
then just replace the whole desktop environment. That's yet to be done, and I know exactly how to do it, and I'm on the right track for doing so.
Okay. Um, like, I know you could obviously like nest it and run it on top of it, but, like, you're making it sound like you'd actually replace the environment.
hmm you can. And remember how earlier I said I'm into macOS tweak development?
Mm,
This means I typically look into macOS source code without access to the source code, and I have to reverse engineer private frameworks and API. And I end up figuring out how stuff works and how stuff renders and how stuff connects to your display.
mhm,
And
mhm,
there's all sorts of stuff going on. There's behind the scenes on your Mac. So when you boot up your computer, you eventually hit a login screen.
mhm,
And I like to make parallels here. So this is basically your display manager, and macOS doesn't give you any options here.
mhm,
But if you were able to make your own login window, you'd have your own display manager. You could select your own desktop environments. And if you figure out how to log in, you can authenticate users and create a brand new third-party macOS desktop environment that runs on macOS directly.
mhm,
And it just so happens that I have a friend of mine who's been working on this for a few years now, and they just figured out, like just now, how to replace your entire desktop environment, and it bypasses login window as well. So I won't give too many details, but all you really have to do is do a standard Nix run to run the project,
mhm.
and you're immediately rebooted into this third-party desktop environment with the login window replaced completely. And that's how I plan
Okay.
to do it.
Okay, that's very interesting.